All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Dan and Catherine. And this is the first time not the first time, it's been a while since we've been live on YouTube, so we decided to give it a go again. And anyway, today we're going to be talking about a new book. We're going to be talking about The Soul of Money by Lynne Twist. And we hope that you'll be interested in watching this, talking about this as well. And if you'd like to join us in our Facebook group, you can go to mindsetmasterycollective.com. I'll share a link to that right below in the comments here on YouTube. And then, of course, you can also participate with us if you'd like as well. Just send us a message or either right here on YouTube in the comments or in our Facebook group, and you can join us as well. But before we get going on this topic, I want to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we will get going on the soul of money.
Good morning. This is Catherine Clement from Boulder, Colorado. Looking forward to this book. I'm already to chapter 3.
Dan Sissick in sunny Las Vegas right now, but it is getting cold here. I know people don't believe that it actually gets cold here in Vegas, but it does. We've been getting out into the 30s, so I'm enjoying being inside and warm and looking forward to this chapter and what we'll get out of it.
Awesome. So I'm just starting to try and get used to this Google Hangouts thing again, where all the buttons and the mute and video and all that kind of thing are. So hopefully we're coming through loud and clear for those of you who are watching. So chapter 1 of The Soul of Money. It starts out and it says the title is Money and Me, Money and Us, and then there's a quote. It says, money is like an iron ring we put through our nose. It is now leading us around wherever it wants. We just forgot that we are the ones who designed it. And it says Mark Kenny. And it starts out, Lynn starts the story out and she's talking about this guy Chumpy, who is from the Amazon, from a village in the Amazon rainforest, and he's like separated, what she says, a 10-day hike from any form of civilization as we know it. So pretty far out there in the middle of nowhere. So he has no interaction with money, and I think we forget sometimes that there really are civilizations that are kind of hidden out there in the middle of nowhere, and they just are not familiar with the way that the rest of the world is working. And says they'd lived without money for thousands of years, and of course that was because they'd never had any interaction with it. And of course here we are, all caught up in the midst of all of it. And but anyway, I thought it was really interesting because she was talking about how their way of what she said, they had no relationship with money, but reciprocity. I can't speak today, guys. Reciprocity. Can somebody say that word, please? I feel like a ding dong. Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Okay. Reciprocity was a social currency. It was understood that everyone shared with everyone else and everyone took care of everyone else. I should have read that word like 3 times before we jumped on here live, and I made a fool of myself. So fun times. That's what we're all about here, right? But anyway, I thought that was really interesting because, it was just understood. Everyone shared, everyone provided for each other, and they all worked together for the betterment of their whole entire culture. And we've gotten away from that big time. I mean, with, of course, when money was developed thousands of years ago for our civilizations, it was an effort to help to facilitate that trade back and forth between people, but somehow or another along the way it just went buku crazy. So so guys, when you were first reading this chapter, what was kind of one of the first things that popped up for you?
Well, I haven't read the whole thing, but the part like you were talking about, how they talked about the community and stuff, and they basically helped and did. The part that got me was this one line where it says, "If Tantu's daughter married Natum's son, then their friends and neighbors came together to build them a house." Where its neighbors and having an invested part to see to it that the young couple had a place to be and to grow and to start their lives in. They just didn't leave it to them to fend for themselves. Kind of like, my brother and his wife, their oldest son and his girlfriend just got their first place, and they used their money and signed the lease and everything for a year and stuff. But my brother and his wife went and bought a lot of the house things that they needed for their house that they didn't have. So in a way they still help provide, but I think we've really gotten away. We tend to um, kids tend to run off and go and want to do their things on their own and stuff, and we tend to you know kind of put that on as we're growing up, that do it yourself, go out, do and stuff. And like you said, we've kind of gotten away from the community-ness of life, where I mean, I don't want everybody to come and do everything for me, don't get me wrong. I think that you have to do some things for yourself to help participate and be a part, but that genuine openness to be willing to help and go and help others, I think we're sadly lacking a lot of that in this day and age nowadays. And it's very prevalent in the meism of culture out there.
It just made me sad because, there's a lot of cultures that have survived for millennia without money. And sadly, in our culture, everything is based on money. And there's a part in the book that speaks to that, from the people that we're friends with, the relationships that we have, the house that we live in, whether we eat or not, whether we have electricity or not. It's everything in our culture is based on money. And sadly, a lot of people also base the value of another person on the amount of money that they have, and the number of people who have been allowed to die because they didn't have the money to pay for the medicine they needed or the hospital bill or whatever. The number of people who have been just outright murdered for money, or the wars and thousands of people that have been killed over money. It just made me very sad, and to think that to recognize that at one time there wasn't money, and everybody, I mean, I'm sure people still died, but everything wasn't like, people had lives, and they ate, and people shared their food, and they worked as a group. And we've really lost our way. And I know that there are groups of people working on these issues. And the introduction to this book, she talks about all of her experience with helping different organizations, the World Hunger Project, things like that. Amazing lady who wrote this book, involved in multiple projects, to try to better things for humanity. And just really have much respect to this Lynne Twist lady. And I know that there are organizations that are working towards going back to that type of communal living, where everybody is thriving and money isn't the center of everything. And of course, I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is, oh my goodness, if you could hear the conversations from my back seat. I'm an Uber driver, and sometimes I just want to like kick people out of my car, quite honestly, because they just we're riding along and they're just judging everything that everybody's wearing along, that they can see out the window, and just the conversations are so shallow and so it just breaks my heart, to know. I've been working with people in other countries for years now, and so I'm very aware of the struggles, not only here. I mean, here in the US we do have struggles, and in other countries where people are literally starving to death every day, and people starve here too, don't get me wrong. Um, but in some other countries, you like here we can go to the hospital if we're bleeding and get treatment. In some other countries, you have to pay your bill up front before you get treatment, or you just die. And it could be over something that costs pennies, and it's just, and to see, if you could see how many Teslas that I see in a day, and cars that are, equivalent to Teslas as far as the cost of them. And I think about how many people that could feed, and how many lives that could save. Um, yeah, this book it saddened me, but I mean, it's something that I have noticed for a long time, and it's trying to figure out, okay, obviously this is an issue, but now how do we fix it? How do we go backwards? Because, here we are, and this is the way it is, and now what do we do about it? Um, I also loved a little bit further on in the book, it talks about how, you can be, or this is so true for me. I don't know about for anybody else, but this is completely true for me. I can be, having a great day, enjoying the beauty of everything, kind of like in my Zen space, just so in love with everything in the universe, and then the subject of money comes up and I can turn into the wicked witch of the West because there's just not enough. And one of the things that it speaks about is that that's not only true for people who don't have a lot of money. It's also true for people that have a lot of money because, the bills just get bigger, and the challenges just cost more. And that's another thing that I hear in my back seat because I give rides to a lot of businessmen, and they're always talking of, of in the ranges of millions and billions of dollars. Like they're on their phone on a business call and they're like, yeah, and we're going to transfer $850 million and blah blah blah. And it just blows your mind that some people have so much and some people have so little, and yet the mindset, like, I don't know who's the richest. Sometimes I think the poor people are the richest because they haven't lost their humanity. Pain and struggle develops compassion. And from what I've seen, for a lot of people, having a lot of money develops greediness and selfishness.
At the beginning, well, not the introduction section, or maybe that was part of it, but where she was talking about their journey with money and how they were kind of in this mode of accumulation and keeping up with the Joneses and all of that kind of thing before she just kind of had a shift in her life and decided to focus on something different. And I think it's interesting how we do kind of, I don't know, from what I've noticed as well, and this is, of course, just from my perspective, is how that tends to happen. When, a few years ago when we were living in our camper and living on, very small amounts of expenses and small amounts of income. And, I had a lot of peace in my life. I didn't feel like I was really doing anything major to make a difference in the world, but I had what felt like less stress. I wasn't as stressed out about everything, you know. And we've been back up here in Indiana, and we've got a lot more going on. We've got a trucking business, and then I've got my retail job, and we've got grandbabies, and we've got all these different things, and and I think ahead, it's like, okay, what are our goals? And the more things that we have in our goals, as far as like accumulating, whether it's getting rental properties, or whether it's investing in businesses or whatever, there's this added stress to it. And it has just been feeling like, okay, what's really the point of this? I don't know. It's just like this whole financial aspect. Of course, I look at my aunt and uncle. They just came down this past weekend, and they have a lake house, and then they have another house in Muncie, and they have rental properties, and they used to have a communications company, and they sold that, and they have a large amount of assets, that are supporting them in their retirement, which I think is just wonderful for them. But yet at the same time, I look at all of the things that they had to do to get there. Of course, they didn't have children, and that was by choice, but they didn't have, as the family life that what we had, with my kids, and now with my grandchildren and whatnot. And of course, there's trade-offs, obviously, when you have, like Lynne was talking about, when they were in accumulation mode, and they thought they were looking out for their children, or they thought they had their children at their best interest, but yet at the same time they're not really spending any time with them. And but I was looking at my aunt and uncle, because I'm like, they're taken care of in their retirement. They don't have to worry, because they were able to accumulate these assets that are now paying for their expenses. So I look at the world in a way, it's like, okay, we have to have money in order to cover our expenses and to provide for ourselves. But yet at the same time, it's like, what are we trading for to get that, and it's this hard line that we have to balance on. I feel like, because if I'm more focused on okay, I got to do this and this and this in order to get that and that and that, then I have less peace in my life than if I'm focused more on family and not worrying about the money. But of course, you have to worry about money to some extent, or not necessarily worry about it, but you have to consider it, because if you don't, then you could lose your house, or your electric could get shut off, or and it's frustrating. There's a part in here where she was talking about this chumpy guy. I want to skip forward to that just a smidge. And she was saying, when the community is in the rainforest home, they are prosperous and have everything they need, and have been for centuries, even millennia. One step out of the rainforest into our world, and they can't eat, find shelter, or live for any length of time without money. Money is not an option; it's a requirement. And then if we look at nature, I was thinking about this the other day when I was just reading in this chapter. I'm like, everything in nature doesn't need money. Animals don't need money. Birds, the ocean life, trees, grass, all of that. None of those need money, and they're doing just beautifully. They're growing and being amazing. All of nature is prosperous and abundant, and yet people, on the other hand, we have to have money in order to survive in this universe, or in this world, and it's frustrating. I mean, even sometimes we watch those shows that are like the homesteaders, or the people who are trying to get out in, they're just out there in Alaska or whatever, or out in the wilderness somewhere. And even though for the most part they're living off the land, they still have to have some kind of money to pay taxes if they own land, or rent if they don't own land, or and it's like, we just can't go back to nature. I mean, it'd be nice if we could do that, where we could just go back, but we're so integrated as a society. We're dependent on each other for food and electricity and shelter and everything. I mean, most people don't even know how to do some of the basic skills that would be required to survive if we didn't have the society that we have today. And so I think this is a really great book to be looking at. When I first heard about it, I don't even remember where I heard about it, but I was like, oh, well, this will be, just a great book to study on this subject, because I have struggled with this kind of thought inside of me about that aspect of, all of nature is abundant and doesn't need money, and yet we as a people have to have it in order to survive. And how do we balance that? Um, I mean, how do we balance that? That's the question.
Well, I was going to jump in and say, one, going back to a little bit of what Catherine was talking about how, um, I'm a part-time Uber driver too, and I've got people that ride with me. But when I interact with my riders, I don't try to focus on those things, or, I get some business people and stuff and things like that. But I tend to converse with them more, I think, on a personal level, to ask them how their day's going, what's going on, how their day's been, and stuff like that. And then I try to be positive and look at, give them positive things to look at and view, and go from there. Because, like she says, you can get in there and you can hear some of these people and some of the stories, and it can really bring you down. And I just, don't want to get down, because I'm out there trying to interact with people, and if I'm in the down mode, they sense it, they feel it. So in that sense, I try to go from, so that way I don't get to that level. Two, um, going back to, money and the issue, like there's, she was talking about some organizations helping and doing things. St. Jude, recently I got involved with that through a friend, just by helping fundraise money for their annual walk they do here. But I've always seen the commercials and how they talk about they don't ever charge the, patients and their families. They give them places to stay, help them with those type of costs, so that way they don't have to worry about that expense, and they can focusing on getting better, rather than the added stress of worrying about bills. And I think that's something else to look at, is, how we view and look at money and bills and our way of life, and how we put that importance and that emphasis on money because we know we need it. But going back to what you were saying, Samantha, about, if you look at nature and stuff, and I'm going to use it for my, my view and my personal beliefs, but I think it kind of carries across, creator, um, you know, infinite intelligence, God. But in the Bible, it talks about, you know, God providing for us, or the creator providing for us and giving us the things we need in his timing, and in that timing, and not to worry so much. Because look at how the flowers are cloth and beauty, and how they spring up every year, and go through their cycles. How birds don't worry about their food, they go out and they find food. Sometimes they have to forage a little bit, sometimes because of man and nature, and how we built and overtaken a lot of some of those lands, that yes, there's less, but somehow they still continue to go on, and without those things. So money, when I think when it was originally brought about, was meant to be a way of how to procure things that kind of were needed, but that had always been had a resolution to people coming together in community and working and solving and finding ways around it to get to the answer without using money. They bartered, they trade, they offered services, they got together and decided to help somebody, they shared things like that. And I think that's where we've lost that sight. We've forgotten, and we've made money that power that so encompasses everything, that's taken over everything, and given it the power it doesn't deserve. As we've read in other books and as we've learned, money's a tool, and that's how we need to look at it, and as a means and a way, but don't let it be that overriding part of how it consumes us. Can you less? Um, because I'm going to say it was a full life, because it was. You were content, you were happy, you didn't feel that same stress. it's just a different level. But how, where we tend to think we need things or want things, and in watching my roommate and how he is, sometimes it's like, you know his thought process is, oh well, if I don't get it, I don't need it, obviously. But then there are times when he sees his daughter and he wants to give her everything, do everything for her, and that comes into play. And sometimes you have to sit there and just draw that line and say, no, this is something I don't. It's a want. It's not a need. It's not really a part of necessity in life. And I think Catherine will probably play that out very well too, because of living how she's been living over the last few years. You know, it is a more basic. It is different, and you get a different feel. Even me, I'm starting to try and get rid and declutter on some things, because I realize when I come home sometimes that, even though my home is my sanctuary, but there are times where I come in and I'm like, oh, I would like to replace that. Oh, I want to change that. No. But then I realize that, what, what's that ultimately going to do? Or, is it for me, or can I find a better way or means of being able to maybe go out and do something more for, couple of organizations I want to get involved with, more with St. Jude and stuff, and helping and do things like that. So, um, yeah, it's a funny paradox that we find ourselves in and fall into because of what society teaches us about money.
Earlier in the introduction, and Catherine, you brought up the introduction, and I had intended to say something about that at the beginning, just to kind of guide our conversation, or guide this, this first video of our discussion. And I wanted to just read what she wrote here at the beginning of the introduction. She said, this book is entitled The Soul of Money, but it is really about our own soul, and how and why we often eclipse it, dismiss it, or compromise it in our relationship with money. The way we get money, use money, give money, or sometimes just try to avoid thinking about money. This book is about finding a new freedom, truth, and joy in our relationship with money. This is the strange, troubled, and wonderful part of our lives. Ultimately, this book is a pathway to personal and financial freedom. And I thought that was really interesting, just a pathway to that personal and financial freedom. And I've listened to a number of listened to, because I do Audible a lot, but I listened to a number of different financial books over the past few years. And one thing that has kind of struck me with it is that, I have changed my relationship with money, and of course I still struggle with that want need thing a lot too. But the way that I handle my money when it first comes in is completely different than way that I used to before, because I set money aside specifically for the things that I have, expectations, kind of like a budget, but yet not exactly like a budget. So I set aside money for fun, and I set aside money for just pleasurable things, because I feel like as a human, and being in this human life, that's part of it, is that it's just doing things just because we want to, because they're enjoyable, and because we want to experience them. And I have noticed that just in the past few years, since I've been doing that, that the things that I buy that are just for fun or just for pleasure, I enjoy them so much more than what I did before, when I felt like I was, getting something that I shouldn't get, because I ought to be spending money on something else. So it's just like that, changing the relationship with in my own mind, of how I view the things that I spend money on, because I feel like so much of it is just in our own mind, literally. I mean, we buy something, say, that we don't necessarily need but we want, or maybe we just want it in the moment, and then we berate ourselves after that for having done it. And I have just some silly little things that I've bought over the past couple of years that have just been strictly because I want them, and I have felt really great about having them afterwards because I had this purpose for allowing that in my life or in my financial aspect of our lives. And for my husband as well. It's like this year he bought a motorcycle, and he had been wanting to buy one for years. I mean, for the longest time, and we just never had the money to do it. Or it was just, truth was, we just never set aside money to do it because we felt like we didn't have enough because we got to pay bills, got to do this, got to do that. And I think about the way that I am with money now, and I realize that I could have been just putting aside money specifically for that, and then it would have been a great exciting thing that we got to get. And of course it was this year, but it was I don't know. It's interesting how we are with ourselves when it comes to money, and we talk about wants and needs, and then sometimes we have. I have experienced. Excuse me. I've experienced, when there isn't enough money, or when it seems like there's not enough money in our lives at a given time, and we feel like we need something, or we want something, or sometimes you really do need something and you don't have the funds for it. And then this kind of anger, frustration, disconnect, like she's kind of talking about the disconnect that we have, it comes up, and it creates this angst in your life where you're just like, God, why does it have to be this way? When the world is so abundant, and yet here I am struggling to get this one stupid thing that I really could use or need or want or whatever. And it's so frustrating sometimes. But what I have noticed is just, by managing my money in a different way, that I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, on some of the things. And yet on some things they're just like, okay, well, I don't think we're ever going to get there unless something big happens. And then am I willing to trade whatever it's going to take in order to get that? Probably not. So I don't know. That's my thought process for right now.
I think we get angry.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry. There's a little bit of lag. I think we get angry because we realize that not necessary. Like this whole, somehow on a soul level, I think we realize that people have survived well for millennia without money. And now we've kind of screwed up and made everything about money. And I think that's what makes us angry, because we realize that there's another way. And and social media, is a wonderful thing, and it's helped connect people around the world and develop friendships, and it really is a wonderful thing. But the other thing that it does is it points out the disparity between different cultures and different peoples, and for anyone with a tender heart, that hurts. And when we tend to hurt, we get angry. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. There's a spiritual dude that I listen to. I can't remember his name right now, but he talks about money, and he talks about the soul of money kind of in a different way, and maybe she will later in the book. I don't know, but um, he talks about money, literally having its own soul, and what if you were money, how would you want to be utilized? In other words, would you want to be just kept in a bank for your whole life, like you're in prison? Or would you want to travel around the world and go from hand to hand, and helping each person along the way? And that kind of puts a different spin on it too. When you think about, wow, how would this money really want to be used? And you know it kind of made me feel a little guilty, actually, for sticking it in a bank. It was sort of funny, but I don't have a large bank account. My money kind of comes in and goes out, but I think about the money that's stuck in there. And of course, it's not really stuck in there because money is actually just numbers. It's strange. One of the things she mentions is that, I mean, literally, money is paper. So it's no different than a Kleenex. Kleenex is paper. And yet, look at the difference that we put on the value between the two, between a Kleenex and say $100 bill, you know, and but it's all we've invented all this. Like we've invented a trap is the way I look at it. Um, because that passage that you read, I love that passage where you were talking about um, how if they take one step out of the rainforest, here they've survived for millennia, and if they take one step out of the rainforest, suddenly they are a destitute, homeless person. They've gone from somebody who has been maybe a stellar person in their community and a leader and living well, and they take one step out of the rainforest, and now they are a destitute, homeless person because they have no money. And my God, the way that the toll that takes on a person when they realize, and I have found this working with people from other cultures too, they look at the United States as, the land of abundance and everybody here has more than enough. And in some ways we do, but what they don't realize is that every decision that we make is based on money, almost every decision of what we're going to do, what kind of work we're going to do, where we're going to go to school, who we're going to marry, how we're going to, get back and forth to work, whether we're going to have any retirement or everything. What brand of peanut butter we buy. I mean, everything is based on money. And I don't think that they understand the imprisonment that comes with that. And I'm not saying, oh, feel sorry for us in the US. Not at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I don't think they understand how expensive it is to actually live here. Like I have helped some people pay some bills in other countries, and I'm shocked at how little it is, really. Like people that needed their hospital bills paid off or whatnot. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to be, $25,000 or something like it would be here, a very simple procedure. And it to them, it's millions of dollars in their money, but it's really like $100 in our money, and they don't. It's incomprehensible to them to think that we have to pay thousands of dollars a month. We have to come up somehow with thousands of dollars a month just to not be homeless. To have a roof, to have food, to have some kind of transportation, whether you have your own car or a motorcycle or you use the bus, you still have to pay for it, right? So um, freedom, there's a lot to be said for that more simplistic lifestyle, Samantha. Like you said, it takes so much stress off of you, huge amounts of stress. And so all these people that are wanting to be, affluent, want to be millionaires, the problems just get bigger. The challenges just get more expensive. The and like Lynne pointed out in the book, when they switched from, how can we accumulate all this stuff for us to how can we accumulate to help others? Yeah, that's a major shift there, but it still doesn't take away the challenges associated with that lifestyle.
I was going to jump out and say something that kind of has hit me from looking through the chapter is how they originally, kind of decided to start interacting with the outside world, so to speak, once they kind of came in contact. And how, Chumpy, I guess, was one of the ones picked to come here to America to learn and all that. But how when they went back, how they wanted to save their rainforest homeland, because I'm reading from the book, they would have to work with the fact that it was valuable to others for its money making potential. And I guess they learned and understood that. And um, some other indigenous groups from the region had learned about money the hard way. They had traded the rights to their land for money that was gone as quickly as it had come. And in the end, they had lost their land, their home, their way of life, and the heritage that had been theirs for all time before. And the Anchor tribe or people learned this lesson, and they recognized that their particular challenge would be to use the power of money clearly and consistently to save their highest goal, to protect the rainforest and manage its resources to support a sustainable future for themselves and all life. They understood their new and historically unprecedented relationship with money must be grounded firmly in their own core values and their highest commitments to life and land. And I think that's one thing that we, again, going back to, have, you know, just gotten so out of whack with, um, like what you were saying, Catherine and Samantha. I look at it as money as a tool, and switching the point of view of how can I get more of it for me instead of what can I do with it to put it out. Kind of like what you were talking about, looking at it from the money soul point of view is, you know, doesn't want to be sitting in their bank, just sitting there twiddling his thumbs, so to speak, or being out there, being useful, being impactful, doing what it's supposed to be doing, being traded and used, um, and making an impact. And it kind of, that's how we all want our lives to be. We all want to be useful and important, valuable, have an impact on the lives of others in our life. And we just switch the placing of where that goes, and have lost, that money is the tool and the ways and means, but don't let it override anything that we're trying to strive for, and don't let it take away that peace and contentment that we need in order to be able to move forward to facilitate those things. Because if we start letting it override us, and we get very antsy, or a lot of angst and stress because, oh, how are we going to take care of this or do that. But looking back to how nature is, and realizing that if we follow kind of how nature is, trust and believe and accept and work towards the goal that we're working towards, somehow it should manifest itself and come about in the way and time and means that it should come through, if that makes sense. My brain's going 90 miles a minute, so I hope that made sense the way I said it.
Yes, it did, Dan. One of the points that Lynne makes in the book, she talks about another book called Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. Maybe we'll put that on our list at some point. And how she writes about people who, basically, to sum it up, basically it's people who are doing jobs that they absolutely hate. Like a piece of them dies every day. A piece of their soul dies every day because of the work that they do that they absolutely hate for money. But they have to do it for money, or they feel like they have to do it. They feel like they have no other options. And maybe they do, and maybe they don't. Who knows? But it's that is so apparent to me, and like how many wars and how many, like I said before, how many lives have been taken over power and money, and how many people take their own lives every day because they just don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see the end to their suffering and their struggles over money. And they take their own life over this false construct. Like it's almost ridiculous when you really look at it and think about it. And I know that personally, and I feel like everybody on this panel has as well, uh, have been involved with different opportunities or different companies where the integrity was questionable and we walked away, because uh, it didn't sit well with us. And, but some people are in a situation where they don't feel like they have any other choice. And so they're going along with things that are out of integrity or are detrimental, harmful to other people. I mean, when you think about even something like, say, the water, in there's a lot of places where the water's contaminated, and there's people that know the water's contaminated, and yet they're forced, with quotation marks around that, forced to lie to people, basically, just a straight out lie and say, no, the water's fine, and then they have to, and they feel like they have to do that to keep that paycheck, to keep that job, to keep that roof over their family's head, and yet it's destroying it's breaking their heart and destroying their soul, all at the same time. And so they have this love-hate relationship with their own selves, over what they feel like they're forced to do because they don't feel like there's any other way. And it's sad that it's sad that we, and I guess you could call it a matter of faith sometimes, but I mean, it's basically what you've been raised with. Thank God, I was open to a simpler life. And Samantha, thank God you were open to a simpler life, because some people would never even consider doing something like that. There was an argument between a husband and wife in my back seat one day. She didn't want to have anything to do with this couple that they just had dinner with anymore. They were no longer going to be friends, period, because the woman took her leftovers home. And how ghetto is that? She doesn't want to be friends with somebody so ghetto that they're going to take their leftovers home. And I mean, to me, I would feel wasteful if I didn't take my leftovers home. I mean, I would see it as wasting food or something. So it's all a matter of perspective of where she's probably been raised to think that way, and would never ever consider looking at it in another way. So I think that I'm so happy that Lynne wrote this book and it gives us an opportunity to look at a different perspective, and to realize that we shouldn't base, like you said, Samantha, people beat themselves up every day because they feel like they're a failure because they haven't made status quo amount of money. And we should not be basing our value on our bank account.
When you just said that about the woman in your back seat, that just boggles my mind. I can't even imagine having such a I I can't such a strong feeling about something that to us seems so petty, you know. I just and I'm sure I don't know where she comes from in her life and where she grew up or whatever, but you know, I'm sure she's got some deep held beliefs on that, obviously, and but it boggles my mind. It just completely boggles my mind. I don't even understand it. And but we are actually at the top of the hour, and we generally end right at the top of the hour. So, but I wanted to read just a few things from this last section of the book before we finish up. But before I do that, Dan, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, it's funny because it's funny because we've talked about money before and things like that, and it's weird how it's still this universal uh, pain in our ass, just to be point blank about it. You know, because it does come down to, yes, for the most part, we've come into a society where we need money to live and survive. But in this example, we've met people who have survived for lots of years. I'm sure they're still discovering some tribes out there and stuff that have never been touched and talked to or interacted with, that have survived for thousands of years, the way they have. And so it's still, to me, how we've let something become such an overriding, overarching, over encompassing part of the overall fabric of our lives, when it never should have been what it has become. And that's just, and yes, I'm a big part of it because I play into it. I mean, I like my house. I do like my house. I want to stay in my house. I want to keep making the mortgage payment. But if I want to keep my house, then I have to keep, so that big kind of, and it's like, can I ever get just some peace, and get to where I don't have to have that headache or have to have, and any anymore. You can't really just go out, find a piece of land, kind of stake it out, build your house, and live your life. You know, it, it's somehow somebody's placed a value on it everywhere, and it's just so funny how it's so overreaching and so engulfing our lives.
Yeah, I know you couldn't hear me. I was talking to my husband. um, so anyway, okay, so I want to read a couple little things from the last section of this. And this last section says, making a living that affirms life. And I'm just going to read the couple of things that I underlined in here, just kind of to sum up a little bit. So it says, each of us experiences a lifelong tug of war between our money interests and the calling of our soul. When we're in the domain of soul, we act with integrity. We feel at peace within ourselves and confident that we are an integral part of a larger, more universal experience, something greater than ourselves. When we enter the domain of money, there often seems to be a disconnect from the soulful person we have known ourselves to be. The result is a deep division in our way of being, in our behavior, and in our sense of our own character and integrity. That gap exists for all of us, myself included, and it is in the very heart of the toughest struggles in life for all of us. And just so you know, if you're trying to follow along, you can't, because I'm skipping like big sections and just kind of like summing up with certain sentences. I feel that all go together. A little more further down, it says, money itself isn't the problem. Money itself isn't bad or good. Money itself doesn't have the power or not have power. It is our interpretation of money, our interaction with it, where the real mischief is, and where we find the real opportunity for self-discovery and personal transformation. Your relationship with money can be a place where you bring your strengths and skills, your highest aspirations, and your deepest, most profound qualities. In a world that seems to revolve around money, it is vital that we deepen our relationship with our soul and bring it to bear on our relationship with money. In that merger and that commitment, we can create a new and profound spiritual practice. Our relationship with money can become a place where day in, day out, we can engage in this meaningful spiritual practice. The chapters ahead are an invitation to confront our challenges with money, our fears around money, our addiction and attachment to money, our remorse and regret and hurts around money, and to embrace all of its arena for personal growth, a wonderful place in which to work on our own transformation. In that engagement, we give money its soul. I thought that it was important to kind of read some of that as we sum up for this chapter and look forward to these next chapters ahead, because I think this is just going to be a really great book where we can kind of dig into some of these deep held beliefs and deep held fears and frustrations and angers and all of that kind of thing, so that we can maybe change our relationship with money and have a better future for ourselves. Because I mean, we all have to have money, we all have to pay our bills in order to survive in this culture, and there is no way that we can just step out of it and go back to the way it was for Chumpy at the beginning of there. We just can't. I mean, we can't all do that. I suppose one person could, but that's not really realistic for the rest of us. And we got to look forward into the future, because our future is only becoming more technological. And I think there are ways that we can simplify our lives, but we have to embrace this future that we are stepping into, and figure out the best way that we can move forward in a way that is in harmony with our soul's purpose, our soul's desires, and yet also be able to live in this culture in a way that that we aren't detrimental to ourselves or other people around us. So with that, guys, I just wanted to wrap up, unless you wanted to jump out and say any final things. Any other thoughts? No? Okay, awesome. For those of you guys who are watching, comment below and just let us know what you thought of this video, and subscribe to our channel so you get a notification when we go live for the next time. It'll be next Saturday. Oh, let me check the calendar here. We're coming up on Christmas, and I don't want to misquote when we're going to be back. Okay, so Christmas isn't until the 25th, so we've got a couple Saturdays that we can meet up and have a discussion for the next couple of chapters. So again, just check us out here on YouTube at Mindset Mastery Collective. You can search for us, or if you go to mindsetmasterycollective.com, you can join us on our Facebook group and get links to all the different playlists that we have studied other books. You can join us in this discussion if you want to participate. We'd love to have you on. You just have to let us know that you want to, so we can give you the link. Okay, with that, have a great, awesome, and amazing weekend, and we'll see you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.